The content in this video is based on factual, real-life events and public records. All opinions expressed are for educational and documentary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised, as some scenes may depict sensitive content. This video is intended for informative purposes and complies with YouTube's guidelines. In the heart of Louisiana, tucked between the Mississippi River and miles of open fields, sits a place many call the end of the line. A prison so vast it has its own zip code. A prison built on land once soaked in sweat, blood, and forced labor. This is Angola, the Louisiana State Penitentiary, the Alcatraz of the South, the farm, the place where time moves differently, where sentences stretch into lifetimes, and where hope feels like a rare visitor. Behind these razor-wired fences and gun towers lies a history many still don't fully understand. A history born from slavery, shaped by violence, and carried by the voices of men serving sentences with no finish line in sight. Today, we step inside that world. We tell the story of Angola, not through myth, but through the truth carved into its soil, its cells, and the men who survive it. If you enjoy real, gripping prison documentaries and true stories, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with your friends and family. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss more shocking and exclusive content. Angola Prison doesn't just sit on Louisiana soil. It sits on history, heavy history, the kind that never stays buried. To understand what this prison is today, you have to understand what it used to be. Long before it became the largest maximum security prison in the United States, this land was part of a massive slave plantation owned by a man named Isaac Franklin. Franklin named it Angola after the region in Africa where many of his enslaved workers were taken from. The name never changed, even after slavery was abolished. That detail alone says a lot about what came next. After the Civil War ended, slavery was outlawed, but the state found a way around it. Louisiana adopted what many southern states embraced: convict leasing. Anyone convicted of a crime, often for something as small as vagrancy or loitering, could be leased out to work. It was slavery by another name, and it targeted black men almost exclusively. These leased convicts were forced to work the same fields their enslaved ancestors had once worked, under conditions that were just as brutal. Many didn't survive. Their lives were cheap to the state, cheaper than the cost of keeping them alive. By the 1880s, Louisiana transitioned from leasing convicts to running its own prison farms. Angola became the centerpiece. It was still a plantation, just with different owners and different paperwork. Prisoners lived in old slave quarters. They worked the cotton fields from sunrise to sunset. Armed guards rode on horseback, carrying rifles. The system didn't hide its origins. It operated exactly the same. The only difference was the uniforms. Reports from that era describe Angola as one of the harshest places in America. Whippings were common. Punishments could be fatal. Men who resisted were beaten, starved, or disappeared. The graveyard on the property, Point Lookout, slowly filled with inmates whose names were often never recorded. Many families never learned what happened to their sons or fathers. The land simply swallowed them. Throughout the 20th century, Angola's reputation grew worse. By the 1950s and 1960s, it was openly called a hell on earth. Overcrowding was extreme. Violence was routine. Corruption was normal. Guards looked the other way while stabbings happened. Some participated. Others used prisoners as enforcers, rewarding those who kept control through intimidation. The plantation structure never died. It evolved. Inmates spoke about being worked to the point of collapse. Men with gangster tattoos on their arms and chests formed makeshift crews for protection. But even then, safety was never guaranteed. The open fields became places where men disappeared into exhaustion, heat stroke, or punishment. Medical care was minimal. Complaints were ignored. Angola didn't rehabilitate. It consumed. One of the most defining symbols of Angola's history is the Red Hat cell block. Built in the 1930s, it got its name from the red-painted disciplinary hats inmates were forced to wear while doing punitive labor. The cell block was a row of tiny, unlit cells where prisoners were locked inside for days at a time, often naked, often beaten beforehand. Some men lost their sanity inside those walls. The state eventually shut it down, but the memory of it stayed alive because the same mentality simply moved to other parts of the prison. As years passed, Angola continued expanding. It grew into a massive complex with working farms, factories, a rodeo arena, and living units scattered across 18,000 acres. But the expansion didn't erase the past. The culture of punishment carried forward. The system relied on inmate labor to run everything: the dairy farm, the row crops, the cattle pastures. For decades, inmates picked cotton under armed supervision, just as enslaved Africans had. Photographs from the 1970s show lines of men bent over in fields, guards on horseback above them. The resemblance to old plantation images is undeniable. Even today, Angola's roots in slavery shape inmate life. The prison still operates as a working farm. Inmates still work the fields, still labor for cents an hour, still follow the orders of armed supervisors. Many of the men serving life sentences, and Angola has more lifers than any other prison in America, know they will die on this land. Some say Angola doesn't just house men, it absorbs them. The prison museum itself displays shackles, chains, and historical documents that show just how deeply slavery and incarceration intertwine. And while the museum acknowledges the past, many former inmates say the real story is still lived, not told. They talk about the culture of control, the pressure to work, the silent understanding that Angola isn't a regular prison. It's a system built on a foundation of exploitation, and that foundation still holds everything up. To walk through Angola is to walk through layers of history: the plantation era, the convict leasing era, the prison farm era, all overlapping. Men with tattoos marking their gangs, their identities, or their struggles move through spaces that feel stuck in time. Some say the land remembers. Some say the land never changed at all. Angola is more than a prison. It's a symbol of how America's past still shapes its present, and that history sets the stage for everything that happens behind these gates. Because once the door closes, life inside Angola follows rules written long before the men inside were born. Inside Angola, the word lockdown means more than confinement. It means stillness, silence, and a kind of pressure that sinks into the mind. For inmates in the most restrictive tiers, life shrinks into a concrete box barely larger than a home bathroom. 23 hours a day inside four walls. 1 hour, maybe, to stretch, breathe, open air, or shower. This routine repeats day after day, month after month. For some, year after year. A lockdown cell in Angola is simple, but not in a comforting way. The bed is a metal frame with a thin, worn mattress. The toilet sits inches from it, made of cold steel. Light flickers through a narrow window slit, barely enough to see by, especially when the evenings settle. The walls echo every noise: a cough from another cell, a guard yelling down the tier, a distant door slamming shut. But most of the time, the sound is nothing. Just air moving. Just time moving. The rules of lockdown life are strict. Inmates must wake up early, often before sunrise. Breakfast slides through a slot in the door, sometimes warm, sometimes not. That same slot becomes the only opening to the outside world. It's where officers pass trays, where they deliver mail, where handcuffs are applied if an inmate is allowed out for a medical visit or the rare hour of recreation. It's also where inmates shout quiet conversations to each other, because direct contact is almost impossible. Men speak through steel doors cracked open only by inches. Voices travel under the doors, echoing through the tier. They talk about home, past decisions, gang politics, legal battles, or nothing at all, whatever helps them feel human for a moment. Many have gangster tattoos inked on their arms, hands, or necks, symbols of identity they earned long before coming to Angola. In lockdown, these tattoos become another part of the story. Some days they're reminders of the past. Other days they're shields, proof of who they used to be, because here identity gets pushed to the edges. Psychological strain builds fast under these conditions. Men talk about losing their sense of time. Morning blurs into night. Some count the days on the wall. Others stop counting altogether. Anger, frustration, depression, they arrive quietly. Some inmates pace their cells endlessly, walking in tight circles. Others lie still for hours, staring at nothing. Reading helps some. Writing helps others. But many don't have the focus anymore. The cell becomes too loud in its silence. Even simple moments become heavy. The sound of keys jingling outside the door can spike anxiety. The clank of the metal food slot snapping open becomes a reminder that this world runs on routines controlled by someone else. A guard's footsteps might mean nothing, or they might mean a cell search, hand restraints, or questions. Constant surveillance creates a tension that doesn't fade. Cameras watch every hallway. Guards watch every movement. Privacy doesn't exist here. 1 hour out of the cell is supposed to relieve some of this pressure, but it often doesn't. Inmates walk single file down the corridor, hands cuffed behind them, escorted by guards. Their hour might be spent in a small outdoor pen, surrounded by high fences and razor wire, where the sky feels close and far at the same time. Some pace, some stretch, some stand still just to feel sunlight on their skin. Then it's back inside, back to concrete, back to the same repeating day. Lockdowns aren't always punishment. Sometimes they're simply the status quo. Angola has nearly 5,000 inmates, many serving life sentences, many with histories of violence, gang affiliation, or disciplinary issues. Lockdown becomes the easiest way for the prison to maintain order. But for the men living inside these cells, the effect is crushing. Medical care during lockdown is limited. Requests pile up. Some men say they feel forgotten. Others say they're remembered only when they're needed for work or discipline. Mental health care exists on paper, but reaching it often requires paperwork, waiting periods, and approval that can take weeks. By the time help arrives, the worst of the mental spiral has already taken its toll. Isolation also fuels tensions. Arguments between inmates escalate through cell doors. Officers intervene when necessary, but most of the time, the conflicts burn silently. Men with tattoos marking their gang affiliations sometimes use them for leverage, even locked behind metal doors. Influence doesn't disappear, it just adapts. Orders are passed through whispers, coded language, or simple instructions shouted down the tier. Every lockdown tier develops its own rhythm. Some tiers are quiet, filled with older inmates who spend their days reading or resting. Others are loud, filled with younger men angry at the world, banging on doors, shouting threats, or rapping to kill time. In both cases, monotony wins. The days blend. The sense of self shrinks. There are stories of men who made it through years of lockdown with their minds intact, but there are just as many stories of men who didn't. Hallucinations, paranoia, insomnia, emotional breakdowns, these aren't exaggerations. They're common experiences. Officers see it daily. Inmates watch their neighbors unravel and hope they won't be next. For some, the isolation becomes a mirror. They replay life choices, old crimes, childhood trauma. Some write journals filled with regrets and realizations. Others refuse to think at all, focusing instead on survival. Angola is built to hold bodies, but lockdown is built to test minds. And that test is unrelenting. The few moments of human connection become lifelines. A letter from family. A guard who says morning without hostility. A short conversation through the door slot about a sports score or a memory from outside. Small things matter because they break the monotony. They remind inmates that the world still exists beyond these walls, even if they can't touch it. Nighttime inside lockdown carries its own weight. Some inmates sleep lightly, waking at every noise. Others stay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Darkness feels deeper in these cells. Dreams come hard. Some inmates whisper prayers. Others talk to themselves. Some press their hands against the cold steel door, feeling nothing but metal between them and the hallway. Lockdown inside Angola isn't an event, it's a world. A world where time becomes a circle, not a line. Where survival means keeping the mind from collapsing inward. Where the smallest moments become victories. And where the concrete walls do more than confine the body. They reshape the spirit. For the men living it, lockdown isn't measured in days. It's measured in what it takes away, piece by piece, quietly, hour after hour. Angola Prison is often described as a working farm first and a prison second. Even today, the legacy of its plantation past defines daily life. Inmates, many of whom are serving life sentences, wake up at sunrise to the same routine their enslaved predecessors endured, the farm line. They gather in the yards before moving out to the fields, under the watchful eyes of armed officers on horseback. Every step, every movement is monitored. Every act of resistance is punished swiftly. The work itself is grueling. Inmates pick crops, cotton, sugarcane, vegetables, under the sweltering Louisiana sun. Temperatures routinely soar past 90 degrees, and shade is rare. Sweat drenches their clothes, dust clings to skin, and muscles ache by midday. The men walk in lines, gang tattoos visible even under the thin prison-issued shirts, forming a human chain of labor that echoes the fields of the plantation era. For every bucket filled, every row picked, the pay is negligible, just a few cents an hour, according to former inmates and human rights reports. The Angola routine is precise. Men are counted several times a day. Any misstep, a slow pace, talking without permission, a dropped bucket, can result in solitary confinement or loss of privileges. Officers wield authority through both presence and intimidation. Those on horseback carry rifles and ride alongside the work lines, scanning faces, checking movements, and enforcing obedience. Some officers walk the lines, shouting instructions or corrections. Inmates learn quickly that efficiency and compliance are survival skills. This routine doesn't stop at the fields. Angola is a self-contained ecosystem of forced labor. In addition to farming, inmates maintain the prison's dairy, manage livestock, work in the kitchen, laundry, and even repair facilities. Each job is carefully monitored, and assignments are made based on skill, behavior, and sometimes arbitrary decisions. Life revolves around work and compliance, with little room for rest or deviation from the rules. Reports from journalists and civil rights organizations describe how exhausting this labor can be. Former inmates speak of heat stroke, dehydration, and exhaustion, with minimal medical attention available. Some describe guards showing indifference to suffering, focusing instead on maintaining the line and enforcing discipline. For many, the mental strain is as heavy as the physical. Repetition, lack of agency, and constant surveillance create a sense of dehumanization that mirrors the prison's past. Despite this harsh reality, some inmates adapt by forming informal support systems. Men with gangster tattoos, often members of prison gangs or crews, sometimes help each other by covering for mistakes, providing encouragement, or sharing knowledge about how to avoid punishment. Others rely on faith, internal routines, or simple mental strategies to endure the long hours. These small coping mechanisms become critical to survival in an environment designed to enforce obedience and break spirits. Controversy surrounds the labor at Angola. Critics argue that forcing inmates to work for minimal pay in conditions reminiscent of slavery violates human rights. Proponents claim it instills discipline, teaches skills, and offsets the cost of running the prison. In practice, the debate rarely changes the experience of those in the fields. Whether framed as rehabilitation or routine, the labor is relentless and inescapable for most men. Beyond the work itself, the farm line represents the hierarchy within Angola. Officers maintain authority through both intimidation and reward. Inmates who comply and work efficiently may earn minor privileges, extra recreation time, the chance to work in a less grueling assignment, or small increases in commissary access. Those who resist or fail to meet expectations can be sent back to solitary confinement, sometimes for days or weeks. The threat of punishment keeps the line moving, keeps the routine intact. Life on the farm also highlights the racial and historical continuity of Angola's structure. Many of the men laboring under armed supervision are black, just as their ancestors were on the same soil. The echoes of slavery remain visible in the rows of crops, the oversight by guards, and the hierarchical control of the prison farm. For some, this is a constant, painful reminder that freedom and equality remain abstract concepts within the gates of Angola. Yet, in this harsh system, moments of human resilience emerge. Journalists who have documented Angola report seeing inmates helping each other through physical strain, sharing water, or joking quietly to lift spirits. Some find pride in completing a row or accomplishing a difficult task. For those serving long sentences, the farm line becomes both a punishment and a routine that structures their lives, giving them a sense of purpose, even if it is imposed externally. The Angola farm also feeds into the prison's internal economy. Inmates produce goods that support the prison population, from vegetables and dairy products to clothing and maintenance. This creates an ecosystem where the prison largely sustains itself, relying heavily on inmate labor. For the men performing these tasks, it is a constant reminder that their lives, time, and labor are controlled entirely by the institution. The autonomy that exists outside is almost non-existent within the gates. The physical environment adds to the psychological pressure. Long rows of crops stretch under the sun, separated by barbed wire and gun towers. Inmates can see the perimeter fences in the distance, a constant reminder that the world beyond is inaccessible. Horses and guards move silently alongside them, an omnipresent watch enforcing discipline. Tattoos peek out from sunburned arms and necks, stories inked on his skin that convey identity and allegiance. Crucial markers in a world where every relationship and interaction carries risk. Inmates often speak of the farm line with a mix of resignation and endurance. It is a ritual of control, a symbol of the prison's legacy, and a daily test of physical and mental fortitude. Former workers recount the oppressive heat, the monotony of tasks, the strict oversight, and the necessity of obedience. They also speak of camaraderie, of unspoken solidarity among men forced into the same punishing routine. These human threads exist amid the machinery of incarceration, proving that even in the harshest conditions, small acts of resilience persist. The Angola routine is not just about work, it's about survival. Men learn quickly which rules are negotiable, which can be bent, and which must be followed to the letter. Every day in the fields is a negotiation with the institution, with authority, and with one's own limits. For those with gangster tattoos and histories of prior criminal involvement, the line is also a stage for reputation, hierarchy, and respect, even under the most restrictive conditions. The farm line is a microcosm of Angola itself, unyielding, structured, and steeped in history. It reminds inmates of the land's past, the prison's power, and the demands placed on every man within its gates. Some find meaning in the repetition. Others feel crushed, but all are changed by it. Angola's labor system is a living relic of the plantation era, a continuation of control through work, and a stark example of how America's carceral system continues to enforce old hierarchies under the guise of routine. Angola Prison has long carried a reputation that precedes it, one of extreme violence, both inside the inmate population and at times involving the guards themselves. This reputation is not exaggerated. The prison scale, its history rooted in brutality, and its combination of isolation, forced labor, and minimal oversight have created an environment where violence is not just possible. It is often inevitable. Within the walls, gangs exert influence that rivals, and sometimes exceeds, the authority of guards. Inmates band together for protection, power, or profit. Tattoos across arms, necks, and chests often signify allegiance, past crimes, or hierarchical status within these groups. These marks are not merely ornamental, they carry weight. A gang tattoo can signal loyalty, mark rank, or serve as a warning. In Angola, where every interaction can be a life or death negotiation, such tattoos are as much survival tools as they are personal expressions. The Angola 3, Herman Wallace, Albert Woodfuss, and Robert King illustrate how violence and systemic injustice intertwine within this environment. In the early 1970s, Wallace, Woodfuss, and King were accused of murdering a prison guard, Brent Miller. They were placed in solitary confinement, a punishment that would last decades. Wallace and Woodfuss, in particular, spent over 40 years in near-total isolation. Solitary confinement in Angola amplifies the psychological effects of the prison's already oppressive environment. Locked in small cells for 23 hours a day, with limited human contact, these men faced mental and emotional strain few can comprehend. Their case drew international attention, highlighting both the extreme conditions at Angola and the systemic flaws in the American penal system. Beyond high-profile cases, everyday life at Angola is filled with violence. Fights between inmates are common, often erupting in the yards, the fields, or even within cell blocks. The motivations vary: territory disputes, gang conflicts, personal grudges, or survival instincts. Weapons are crafted from everyday materials: sharpened toothbrushes, pieces of metal, or improvised shanks. The risk of injury or death is ever present, and medical intervention can be limited due to both access and resources. Gang dynamics govern much of the informal power structure within Angola. Inmates who belong to dominant groups often control access to resources, protection, and even labor assignments. They form hierarchies that mimic the outside world, with leaders and enforcers commanding respect and sometimes fear. Tattoos are the visual markers of this system, signaling who can be trusted, who is powerful, and who may be targeted. Even inside the maximum security environment, this informal governance often determines who survives and who doesn't. The guards, while officially in control, sometimes become secondary players in this ecosystem of violence. Some are strict enforcers, others are indifferent, and a few are directly involved in the maintenance of order through intimidation or complicity. Reports from former inmates describe moments where violence escalated without immediate intervention or where guards selectively applied discipline. In such a high-stress, high-stakes environment, the line between authority and chaos blurs. Prisoner-on-prisoner violence is often cyclical. A stabbing one day may lead to retaliation days or weeks later. Informal codes of conduct exist, but are enforced in violent ways. For inmates, survival often depends on reading these unspoken rules, aligning with protective groups, and asserting dominance or compliance when necessary. Tattoos serve not just as personal identity, but as shields, communicating warnings and histories silently across cell blocks and courtyards. The Angola 3 case also underscores another dimension of violence: legal and institutional. The prolonged solitary confinement of Wallace and Woodfuss, widely condemned by human rights organizations, illustrates how state-sanctioned isolation itself constitutes a form of violence. Psychological trauma, social deprivation, and physical deterioration are direct outcomes of this punishment. International attention to their plight eventually forced reviews and, in Wallace's case, release on compassionate grounds, though only after decades of extreme confinement. Historically, Angola has seen periods where systemic violence erupted in notable incidents. Prison riots, deadly fights, and clashes with guards have marked its record. Each incident underscores the danger inherent in combining overcrowding, high-security confinement, and a culture steeped in historical brutality. The prison size, isolation from urban centers, and self-sustaining farms mean that outside oversight is minimal, allowing violence to escalate unchecked at times. Yet Angola is not solely defined by brutality. Within this environment, some inmates form relationships that emphasize mentorship, survival, and, occasionally, reform. Older prisoners may guide younger ones on how to navigate both the gangs and the prison bureaucracy. Tattoos, again, play a role. They are visual shorthand, signaling allegiance, trustworthiness, or experience. In a place where violence is omnipresent, knowledge and alliances are as valuable as physical strength. Media coverage of Angola, particularly documentaries and investigative journalism, often focuses on these dualities. The prison is both a site of extraordinary cruelty and of remarkable resilience. While the Angola Three drew global attention for the injustice they suffered, other stories of inmates finding faith, mentoring each other, or surviving decades of punishment illustrate the human capacity to endure even in extreme conditions. Tattoos, work routines, and gang affiliations become part of the narrative, signaling both vulnerability and strength. The prison's notoriety as a violent institution affects public perception and policy. Angola is seen as the archetype of maximum security brutality, influencing how other prisons operate and how lawmakers discuss criminal justice reform. Lawsuits and human rights investigations often reference Angola when debating the morality and legality of prolonged solitary confinement, forced labor, and excessive punishment. The prison's reputation has turned it into a symbol, for some, of the consequences of crime, for others, of the ongoing failure of the penal system to rehabilitate rather than punish. Ultimately, Angola's culture of violence, gangs, and prolonged punishment is a reflection of its history and structure. The combination of isolation, forced labor, minimal oversight, and embedded social hierarchies ensures that conflict is a daily reality. Tattoos, gangs, and solitary confinement are tools, shields, and punishments intertwined, shaping the prison environment in ways that ripple far beyond the walls. The Angola 3 case remains a stark reminder of the extremes to which the system can go, while the ongoing life of other inmates underscores the persistent, unyielding nature of Angola's internal power structures. Angola is not just a prison, it is a crucible. Violence is not a feature of the system, it is part of its core, and surviving it, with mind and body intact, requires more than compliance. It requires understanding, strategy, and the will to endure a world where danger is omnipresent, authority is absolute, and the scars, both physical and psychological, are often lifelong. Even in a place defined by violence, isolation, and labor, Angola has pockets of humanity that persist against the odds. The prison hosts one of the largest inmate-run churches in the United States. Sunday services fill large halls with music, prayer, and a sense of community that temporarily transcends the fences, the guards, and the harsh daily routines. Inmates with gangster tattoos, some with histories of violence, gather together in a shared faith, finding structure and purpose outside the farm lines and lockdown cells. For many, religion is a survival mechanism, a tool for coping with long sentences, and a way to reclaim a sense of self within a system designed to strip it away. The Angola Church is more than worship. It provides mentorship and leadership opportunities for inmates. Programs teach literacy, conflict resolution, and life skills. Inmates organize community projects, assist with internal prison education, and provide counseling to peers. These programs, often started by prisoners themselves, demonstrate an ability to reform and uplift even within one of the nation's toughest prisons. Tattoos, once symbols of street allegiance or rebellion, sometimes become marks of personal transformation, with men choosing faith to rewrite their identity. The prison also runs a hospice program, which has drawn attention in national documentaries. Terminally ill inmates are cared for by fellow prisoners, forming bonds across generations and backgrounds. The hospice allows men who otherwise might have been defined solely by criminal acts to contribute compassion and dignity. Families of inmates often remark on the humanity displayed in these settings, acts of kindness that contrast sharply with the otherwise brutal prison environment. This duality captures the complex reality of Angola, a place where cruelty and compassion coexist. Reform efforts have also been part of Angola's recent history. Civil rights groups, human rights organizations, and legal advocates have long challenged the prison's labor practices, solitary confinement policies, and conditions of confinement. Lawsuits have sought to ensure that medical care is adequate, that inmates are not subjected to unconstitutional treatment, and that rehabilitation opportunities are meaningful. While change is slow and incremental, These efforts demonstrate that the prison system is not unchangeable. Angola, despite its size and reputation, is subject to scrutiny and reform, highlighting that accountability and advocacy can coexist even in the most entrenched systems. Education is another avenue of hope. Angola offers vocational training, GED programs, and other educational opportunities. Men who enroll often discover a sense of purpose that extends beyond survival. Learning becomes a quiet form of resistance, a way to reclaim agency in a life otherwise tightly controlled. Prisoners with gangster tattoos may use these programs to transition from symbols of gang identity to symbols of skill, mentorship, and leadership within the institution. These efforts show that transformation is possible, even in a system built on oppression and repetition. Family connection is another lifeline. Letters, phone calls, and limited visitation allow inmates to maintain bonds that are otherwise at risk of fading. For some men, the knowledge that their loved ones await them provides motivation to endure and sometimes to change. Angola's extreme confinement can isolate, but it cannot entirely sever these ties. In a prison where time stretches endlessly, these small moments of human contact are invaluable. Hope at Angola is never easy. It is fragile, intermittent, and often overshadowed by daily realities of confinement, violence, and labor. Yet it persists. Inmates organize book clubs, discussion groups, and informal support networks. These communities help men process trauma, negotiate daily survival, and envision a life beyond the prison walls. For some, faith and reform programs intersect, creating opportunities for introspection and moral growth that were previously unavailable. Tattoos, once badges of defiance, may become reminders of the past or even symbols of resilience. While Angola remains one of America's toughest prisons, the existence of these programs and initiatives shows that even in the harshest circumstances, humanity survives. Change is incremental, but the persistence of inmates and advocacy groups proves that Angola is not a static institution. It is a battleground for survival, for justice, and for the reclamation of dignity. Documentaries capturing life inside Angola often highlight this duality: the cruelty and the compassion, the punishment and the reform, the darkness and the glimmers of light. By showing both, they reveal the complexity of human existence in a place where every day is a negotiation between control and resilience. Angola, for all its brutality, also demonstrates the capacity for growth and transformation, reminding viewers that even in extreme confinement, hope can endure. Angola Prison is more than a facility. It is a living relic of America's painful history, a reflection of systemic brutality, and a testament to the resilience of those trapped within its walls. From the forced labor in the fields to the relentless lockdowns, from the shadows of violence to the rare sparks of hope, Angola tells a story of extremes. It reminds us that the past is never gone. It is carried forward in structures, routines, and human experiences. Yet it also reminds us that even in the darkest places, humanity can survive. Faith, education, mentorship, and compassion persist against overwhelming odds, illuminating the capacity for growth in a system designed to suppress it. For the men of Angola, each day is a negotiation between survival and despair, between submission and resistance, between violence and hope. Their stories are both cautionary and inspiring, revealing a world that is harsh, unforgiving, and yet undeniably human. Angola may be the Louisiana lockdown, but within its walls, the struggle for life, dignity, and change continues. One day, one choice, one act at a time.